Father Emeka was no ordinary priest. By day, he celebrated Mass, blessed homes, and listened patiently to confessions. By night, however, he was something else entirely. Armed with silver crosses, ancient relics, and a quiet rage honed by years of fighting darkness, he hunted demons. Not metaphorically, literally. He found them, faced them, sent them back to the pit they crawled out of. The church knew of his gift. Not all clergy did, of course. To the public, he was simply Father Emeka, stationed in a small parish outside Enugu. But among those who truly understood spiritual warfare, he was the man you called when holy water and Latin chants weren't enough. So when a letter arrived requesting an urgent visit to a remote village called Umuachuku, Father Emeka didn't hesitate. It was an old-fashioned note, faded, handwritten, signed only with the name of the village chief. No details, no official seal. The church hadn't assigned it. This score was personal. That was strange, but he went anyways. He arrived at noon. A narrow red earth road led him into the village, surrounded by thick forests and even thicker silence. The sun was a hot, heavy blanket overhead. Cicadas hummed lazily, their songs the only sound you can hear. And waiting at the entrance, barefoot and smiling nervously, was a girl. "Welcome, Father," he said, dipping her head respectfully. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "My name is Mary. The chief asked me to bring you in." She couldn't have been more than 18, slender, with eyes that looked a little too knowing for her age, yet held a peculiar innocence. They walked into the heart of the village. It was quiet, not lifeless precisely, but profoundly still. Too quiet. Houses stood, neatly swept, but a subtle layer of dust seemed to coat everything, as if untouched by the usual bustle of life. By day, the villagers seemed normal. A bit distant, perhaps, but unfailingly polite. They sold roasted maize from small and quiet stalls. They swept their door fronts with rhythmic, almost mechanical motion. Children waved and ran off giggling, their laughter surprisingly muted, like sounds heard through a thick glass. It was all textbook. Everything was exactly as it should be on the surface. And yet, each night, something felt undeniably off. No drums, no singing, no late night chatter, just silence. A dead, unnatural silence that swallowed the very air. On the third night, a detail snagged in Emeka's mind, refusing to let go. As he walked past the square, he saw the same woman pounding the same yam, in the same dark, again, in the exact same spot, wearing the exact same wrapper. She wasn't blinking. She wasn't speaking. Just the rhythmical dum, dum, dum of the piston, utterly isolated in the vast quiet. He stopped. A prickle ran down his spine. When Father Emeka arrived at the village, he could tell something wasn't right, but he had no idea just how wrong everything truly was. He began to observe closely. He wasn't just there to perform a ritual now. No, this was reconnaissance. He noticed Mary never joined the others to eat. She could cook, yes, the scent of pepper soup occasionally wafting from her hut, but always alone. Sometimes she offered him a plate, and it tasted fine. A familiar comfort in this unsettling place. But when he asked why she never ate with the villagers, she just said with her eyes shifting slightly, "I don't feel like it." Then came the blessing. The village chief, his face etched with lines that seemed to hold ancient secrets, invited him to perform a blessing on the land. He said it was tradition, that it would make the crops grow better. Emeka agreed, but something was wrong. The rich red earth didn't feel dry or cursed. It felt locked, like something ancient had already wrapped itself around the soil and wouldn't let go, like a deep, unbreaking slumber. He performed the blessing anyways, his voice steady, his movements precise. Mary stood quietly behind him, her lips moving, repeating the prayers softly, as if she knew them by heart. At the final amen, a cold breeze passed despite the humid heat, ruffling the leaves in the silent trees. All the villagers smiled. Too wildly, their expressions fixed, almost as if it was painted on. He didn't sleep that night. The silence outside his hut pressed in, heavy and absolute. The next morning, he went walking, not along the village paths, but into the forest. Something had been tugging at him, a strange sense, like a whisper that wouldn't leave. That was when he found the shrine. It was old, hidden under moss and thick vines, almost swallowed by the earth. Yet, someone had been tending to it. Fresh flowers sat in front, their petals still dewy, and carved into the altar stone were names. Names he recognized, names of people he'd greeted, nodded at, and shared a quiet moment with. And next to every name was a date, each of them dead 15 years ago. He returned to the village, quiet, the revelation a cold stone in his gut. He waited until evening, until the pervasive silence has descended once more. Then he found Mary outside her hut, gazing up at the silver moon. "How long have you lived here, Mary?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. She looked at him, and for the first time, her smile dropped completely. The knowing in her eyes deepened, shadowed by something akin to sorrow. "I don't know exactly," she said, her voice barely audible. "Since I was little, maybe 3 years old. I got lost in the forest. I don't remember much before that. Just that I was crying, tired, hungry, and then the villagers found me." Father Emeka said nothing, just looked at her, holding her gaze. "You knew, didn't you?" he finally asked, his voice soft. She nodded, slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Not at first, but yes, she told him the truth, that the entire village had perished 15 years ago in a devastating fire. But when she, a lost child, wandered into the ashes, they returned, not as malevolent spirits, not as monsters, but as themselves, pulled back by something stronger than death, some force of love or guilt or duty. They built this illusion, this quiet, unchanging world, and raised her like their own. She was their reason, their anchor. But now she was 18, and they were tired. So they called for Father Emeka. They called for release. That night, they gathered in the village square. The air was heavy, charged not with fear, but with a profound, aching stillness. No touches, no words save for the whispers of the breeze, just the pervasive silence. The chief, his form now subtly translucent, his voice, when he spoke, was like dry leaves crumbling to dust. "We asked for release. She is grown. She will be safe now." Mary looked at Emeka. Her eyes were pleading, but not desperate. She was accepting what must be. "Please," she said, her voice clear despite the tears that flowed freely. "They took care of me. They gave me everything. They loved me. But I understand." He didn't perform an exorcism that night, not the violent kind. No silver relics brought forth for battle. No screaming, no writhing, just a ritual of letting go. Prayers, incense, soft words whispered into the humid air, words of passage, of peace. One by one, the villagers began to fade, their face peaceful, their expressions warm, as if a great weight has been lifted. The chief was the last. He looked at Emeka, his eyes holding a depth of gratitude that transcended earthly understanding. "Take her home," he whispered, his voice dissolving like smoke. "That's all we ever wanted." Then nothing. Silence. Real silence. The kind that belongs to the living, where crickets might eventually chirp, and a dog might bark in the distance. The kind that holds the promise of a new sound. The next morning, Father Emeka and Mary stood on the narrow red earth road, the forest dense around them. Behind them, the village of Umuachuku was gone. Not in ruins, just gone, like a fog lifted, or a dream vanished with the dawn. The space where it had been was now just an expanse of overgrown land, reclaimed by the wild. He opened the door of his old Peugeot. She got in. They drove away, back to the world. And the wind behind them carried no sound at all. So that is it for today's tale. If you enjoyed this and you are expecting more, like the video, share, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel.